one of the newest members of PHLY and All City. Just like me, I think you have a month, or excuse me, a week of tenure ahead of me. He is the great Fran Duffy, PHLY and All-City NFL analyst and draft guru. What's up, Fran?
Johnny Marks, what's happening, man? Yeah, I've got about a week on you, so we're both new to the club here.
And I knew you were going to be announced, and I knew I was going to be announced like later that week or whatever. So great to finally be able to work with you. I've been an admirer for a long time. You worked with Ike, my former co-host, for a long time. So and you're the best. So this is really, really cool. Congratulations, and I look forward to working with you.
No, absolutely. You too, man. I'm obviously you and I have known each other for a long time, and so being able to now work together, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a great season.
All right, now I'm a little bit concerned that you're still a little bit close to, since you worked for the Eagles for so long, that you may still be a little bit close when you give your analysis on the team. And I'm 3/4 kidding when I say that. But all right, so let's talk about Jalen Hurts. I felt like he had a lot of good moments, and then everybody's going to point to the interceptions, and also there was at least 2 other balls that could have been intercepted. But with everything from the game, you watched it live, you rewatched it, you looked at the film. How would you evaluate Jalen Hurts' game as a whole?
I thought it was probably like an above average performance from Jalen Hurts standards. Obviously, the 2 interceptions were tough plays to be able to accept, right? Because they were in areas of the field where you don't want an interception to happen. When you're backed up in your own end, to throw a pick there, that's almost as bad as taking a safety, right? Because you're setting up the other team for a potential touchdown on a short field. Now, the defense bailed them out there by holding them to a field goal. The other one, it's 3rd down in the red zone, where if you were able to play for the next play and kick a field goal, you take an 8-point lead. And obviously that, at worst, you're allowing a tie situation the next time Green Bay has the football. And so both plays, you're looking at that and you're saying, we can't have an interception in that area. Now, after going back and watching the film, I felt a little bit more at ease on both plays for one reason with each play. On the first one, Landon Dickerson was pushed back into Jalen's lap, and you could see Landon after the play. This was the opening possession. He's looking down at his cleats. He got pushed back. I said it to Ant yesterday, John, where you could almost tell, like, it looked like Landon was wearing sneakers on an ice skating rink.
Right.
He was sliding back in the pocket, and Landon's looking down at his cleats afterwards, like, what the hell? What just happened? And then on the second interception, AJ slipped in the end zone after the ball was thrown. And so it's a cardinal sin for a quarterback to throw late in the middle of the field across your body. You don't want to do that, right? That said, AJ was wide open. He throws the ball. AJ slips, doesn't make the play on it that he's expecting to, and then you have the interception. So overall, those are negative plays. There was the near pick 6 on the play before that second interception, right? And that honestly was the most egregious decision of the 3, in my opinion. And so to me, there were those 3 plays. But then after that, I thought that he showed pretty good command of the offense. Obviously, there's a lot of different things on his plate this year that he's not accustomed to, on top of the new terminology in the passing game. And so I'm willing to accept a little bit of a grace period here with Jalen Hurts. I did not expect him to come out firing on all cylinders with the offense operating at like 100% peak level right out of the box.
Yeah, the second interception, I saw Baldy broke it down. He put the video out on social media. And you see he was wide open, and he slipped. Now, if he slips, he can probably break it up at very worst case to where it's not an interception. It's not the same play for sure if he doesn't slip. So it was actually good to see that. I still don't know if it's worth. You're throwing across your body. You're up 5 points. A field goal makes it an 8-point game. Now, a touchdown puts the game away. So, but 3rd and 13, coming off where you nearly threw a pick 6. If AJ doesn't slip, he sees a wide open AJ Brown. So it's hard for me to say you don't throw that. He was wide open. Now, maybe you throw it a little bit harder. You don't put as much air under it. But, yeah, it going back and watching the film, I saw Baldy put it out there. It does make you feel a little bit different about that play. He was so good at protecting the ball in 2022, Jalen was. Last year, made a lot of bad throws that he wasn't making the year before. Wasn't protecting the ball as much. Had 15 interceptions. Now through 2 games, is he just taking more chances? Fran, it's one thing if you're a Josh Allen who's trying to fit the ball in tight windows and has such a huge arm to where, like Brett Favre, his biggest problem was he thought he could make every throw. Jalen's never been that guy. I guess I just worry about the mental mistakes and throws that it seems like he's been making in game number one and then what you saw last year?
I think the big thing, John, is that when you look at the way that they played in 2022, where that was a high flying offense, a lot of vertical deep shots down the sideline, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, it's fireworks left and right, seemingly every single week in the first half of games, and then they're running to win. Miles Sanders runs for nearly 1,300 yards that season. A lot of that production came in the second half of games as the team was nursing leads. It was just a perfect scenario, a perfect ecosystem for offensive success. And I think when you go to next year in 2023, some of the, I don't want to say luck, but at some point things start going the other way, right? Things are going to regress back to the mean, regress back to the average. And so you started getting some of those interceptions that came back. And then obviously things kind of snowballed towards in the second half of the season from from an offensive standpoint, whether it was the pressure getting to him, some of the things where they were kind of forcing the issue late in games. They didn't have the same situation in terms of having the lead at halftime. They had to throw more late in games. And so I think when you get into some of that stuff, the turnovers, yeah, that was an issue for him last year. But to me, the bigger one was like the fumbles. He was putting the ball on the ground a lot last year. We saw 2 fumbles in the game the other day. They've got to be able to take better care of the football that way. That was the weird thing about it, though, was that, and we talked about this on the postgame show the other night, myself, Bo Wolf, Jamie Lynch, and Vinny Curry, is that with Jalen Hurts, those kinds of interceptions where you're looking at, like, what kind of decision was that? That has been the outlier. He typically has not had an issue with decision making over the course of his career. Sometimes, yeah, like it's a bad throw. Those happen to all quarterbacks, but typically we haven't seen him make bad decisions. And so for me, going into it, looking at it from that standpoint, I say, okay, I'm willing to kind of throw that away and say, let's keep this in mind for down the road and see if this continues to be an issue. But that has not historically been a problem for Jalen in the past.
Last year, after the Niners game, the template was kind of made like, hey, blitz them up the middle, don't let them escape up the middle, keep them within the tackles, and like Eagles didn't really have an answer for it last year. He was among the most blitz quarterbacks in the NFL. What did the Packers do, and how did the Eagles perform against the blitz on Friday night?
Yeah, they blitzed, depending on what service you look at, 7, 8, 9 times. They didn't reach double digits, which I expected them to blitz a little bit more than they did, but it might be that because Jalen Hurts was so effective against the blitz that they decided, hey, you know what, let's pull it back a little. Now, the one caveat I will present, John, is that he was especially bad last year down the stretch against cover zero blitzes, against all-out pressure, where it was no safety help and a straight man more than you can block as an offense. That's where this offense really, really struggled. The Packers did not do that once. That's a little surprising to me. I would have expected that, especially the first drive, second drive, that you would have seen some kind of cover zero pressure just to kind of test it and see, hey, did you guys fix the problems that you had last year? But that said, with the blitzes that they did see, Jalen, I thought, was very decisive with the football. He did a really good job knowing where his answers were in the offense, and that's not something that was present last year. And really what that ultimately comes down to is, you've got 5 eligible receivers in any given play. Understanding, hey, if I get pressure, this is my answer to that, right? This is where I go if I feel like I'm going to be blitzed. So, in the offense last year, they didn't always have that. It wasn't always clear or evident on the film of where Jalen was supposed to go at the top of his drop if he was getting blitzed. In this one, you could see, hey, you know what? There's pressure coming from my right side. I'm going to go to A.J. Brown on the left, and it goes for 20 yards. Hey, there's pressure coming from this side. The linebacker's rotating across my face in front of me. I'm going to attack the void. Here's Grant Calcaterra for a first down. And so just having those answers built within the structure of the scheme, and then Jalen understanding this is where I have to go, that was one of my biggest revelations from going back and watching the film.
Yeah, he looked good. Saquon Barkley probably should have led with this being positive that the Eagles did win the game. A TO debut for Saquon Barkley. And beyond that, because we know he's talented and he had a great game, you get a peek at what it's going to do for the offense. Because now teams are likely to key more on Saquon, being that he just had 3 touchdowns, which is going to open things up for A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, who had big games as it was, Dallas Goedert. What Saquon Barkley can do for this offense, Fran, makes them one of the most dangerous offenses in the NFL for sure.
Yeah, yesterday on ALLPHLY.com, I dropped my offensive breakdown from looking at the film. And one of the things I hit on in there is just how many light boxes Saquon Barkley saw in this game against Green Bay, and how that was that was much different from what he had seen in years past with the New York Giants. And that's really what we would talk about when the Eagles signed Saquon this spring, right? Was that he goes from being at the top of the game plan for opposing defenses on a weekly basis to third, fourth, fifth on the pecking order when you look at A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, the Jalen Hurts rushing attack, Dallas Goedert. You have all these other weapons that you have to account for. And so it's tough to just say, you know what, we're going to load the box against Saquon Barkley and stop this rushing attack. And so what really stood out to me, and it's almost like the blitz plan with Jalen Hurts, what I was most interested to see with Saquon Barkley, we know he's a super gifted runner, right? We know he's big, he's explosive, he's got the ability to hit the home run, but would he be disciplined enough to be able to carry out runs and stay within structure? Because that's always been something that has been a little bit of a bugaboo for him. Going back to his days at Penn State, he was always kind of hunting for that big play, and he would be a little bit quick at times to bounce outside. It'd be somewhat like what Miles Sanders was like here in Philadelphia, and when we knocked Miles at times. The difference was that Saquon is just so much more gifted. He was bigger and more explosive and more powerful, and so he had the ability to get away with that at a little bit of a higher rate. I'll tell you what, I was so excited about what I saw from Saquon in this game. I thought he ran more disciplined than what I've seen from him in the past. He stayed downhill. He was able to run behind his pads and pick up dirty yards. This was a really, really good sign for this offense and for this run game, that he was able to run the way he did, and then the production on top of it, especially in the pass game, that was also the cherry on top.
Man, brings such a different dynamic to this team, having a guy with the skill set and the home run potential. The run, the touchdown, I think the first touchdown run, were one of them where the linebacker was right there in the hole to tackle him, and he kind of just did a quick juke and boom, right in there for the touchdown. The Barkley burst. It's been a long time since we've seen talent like that at the running back position. All right, quickly, the defense. Zach Bond looks legit. He was all over the field, sacks, tackles for losses, quarterback hits. We haven't seen an impact linebacker like this since. Is this the best linebacking performance? And I know it's only one game, but potentially since when? The Super Bowl year with what's his name? Very impressed.
Yeah.
This has a chance for. This is a $1.6 million 1-year deal. See, this has a real potential to be one of these Howie moves where it's like, wow, what a steal. So, I mean, that's overall. How'd you see the defense, and how impressed were you with Bond?
Yeah, I thought Bond had a really good debut. And what was most impressive about it is that this is a position that is not exactly something that he's been well schooled in. He's been kind of bouncing back and forth between being an edge rusher in odd front, so lining up off the tackle, off the tight end, to being a stacked linebacker. It was the most stacked reps he got in a game in like 4 or 5 years. And so I think when you look at Zach Bond, certainly you expect that the arrow is going to be pointing up. 15 tackles, 2 sacks. That's a tough box score, a tough stat line to be able to replicate. I will say, it is just one game. We saw Nicholas Morrow have 3 sacks in a game last year and got really excited, and he was dreadful for the rest of the season. And so you're hoping that you don't go down that path with Zach Bond. But I thought we saw some good things from him and from Nakobe Dean. Honestly, I actually felt even a little bit more encouraged from what we saw from Nakobe as well, just because to me, that was the most that we've seen from him so far that looked like what he was at Georgia, which he was just playing loose. He was playing fast, finding the football. He blows up the screen. He's in position to get that pick 6. He was decisive downhill against the run. So for me, like week 1, you had to feel good about both linebackers coming out of that one.
Yeah, and Nakobe, how do you know if a player's playing well? If you notice him when you're watching the games, right? And that's not really something you've seen with Nakobe. He kind of gets lost. And you're like, how many snaps did he have? Like, he hit that. He did. You noticed him. He made some plays there. Quickly on the defensive line, the one thing that I really worry about, Fran, is getting pressure on the quarterback from your defensive line without blitzing, in particular from your ends. Nolan Smith didn't give you much. Huff didn't give you much. And Brandon Grant played about the same amount of snaps, a little bit more snaps than the 2. I thought he was supposed to be a part-time player. Josh Sweat had an okay game. How was the play of the line, the tackles and the ends in particular, who really didn't have a whole lot of productivity in week 1?
Yeah, for me, this was a difficult one to be able to watch both sides of the football in the line of scrimmage. And this goes for both teams because it was very clear that players had issues trying to adjust to the playing surface, right? And I mentioned Landon Dickerson trying to get his cleats in the ground. We saw Avonte Maddox falling left and right all night long. Jordan Love, the quarterback for the Packers, he never looked settled. Every single time he hit the top of his drop, you could see his right foot slide as he's trying to plant it in the ground. And so it affected some players more than others, but I felt watching the tape that the guys in the line of scrimmage in the tackle box were most affected. And they just struggled with guys that were trying to move forward and get push off the football, just did not do that at a super high rate overly effectively. And so I think when you're looking at the guys on the offensive line and the defensive line, I'm willing to give them a little bit of a mulligan here. That said, I mean, you mentioned the edge rushers. Jordan Davis going into Sunday's slate. I looked this up just from the first two games. So Chiefs Ravens Thursday night, Eagles Packers on Friday night. There were a bunch of defensive linemen that had at least 19 pass rush snaps. Jordan Davis was the only one that did not record a pressure of that group, right? So it's one of those things where you're hoping to see more from those guys. But I am willing to give them a little bit of a mulligan considering the playing surface. It's like trying to grade the Snow Bowl back in 2014 where it's like, all right, like I don't want to kill guys too bad for this performance. Let's see what they look like next Monday night against Atlanta.
It's good insight on the turf. It is. Do they have a Brazilian sod father, or is this I know the regular sod father had retired apparently. Yeah, I don't listen, man. I don't know how if you're the NFL, you don't have you have the playing surface that's like that. I just don't. I don't know. I don't know how you don't have somebody there weeks in advance making sure the turf's okay.
It was one of those things. I reached out to a bunch of people over the weekend just to kind of get their thoughts on it because it kind of blows my mind, especially with what happened with the Eagles in the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, right? That you would make sure, okay, we're good to go. And there was reports from ESPN and from other national outlets that hey, they brought down their head of their grounds crew and they walked through on the stadium the day before and everything felt good. From what I understand, it's like, hey, it's tough to replicate game speed with those guys out in the field. And soccer players are playing on that turf all the time, on that grass all the time. But soccer players, it's a more like graceful, like long distance kind of movement that those guys are running up and down the field constantly. With football, it's more about explosive, violent turf. So every contact with the ground, it's a little bit different. So your cleats are interacting with that grass and with that dirt a little bit differently. And so it was tough to replicate. And obviously the guys, for the most part, struggled to adjust. Some did it better than others. We saw Saquon Barkley slip on that first carry of the night, and then he didn't really have any issues after that. But others, like I mentioned, like Avonte Maddox and Jordan Love and others, were struggling throughout the evening. So it's definitely something to keep in mind the next time there's an international game.
Well, you can catch Fran Duffy all over the platform here, on with Anthony, be on with us here on Philly with Jon Marks, on the Eagles show, PHLY Eagles, post-game, pre-game too. I mean, they got you all over the place there, Franny.
We're doing halftime shows. We got it all. So all things Eagles, we got you covered here at All PHLY.
The pride of Cheltenham High School. I would say probably the most famous alum, or in the top three. You have Reggie Jackson, who probably is a top three, but got to start at Temple. Did not know this about you, Fran. You were the team's video coordinator, hired by Al Golden back in the Golden days, and then Matt Rule went from the Eagles from there. Do the Owls still have a football team? I haven't seen this year how they're doing.
It's been rough sledding the last few years. They made some hires a couple years ago that didn't go all that well, and so they're trying to dig out of that now. I do like Stan Drayton, the new head coach, but certainly an uphill climb at this point. So we'll see how things shake out this year.